I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. Here's one for you, Steve. When I first got into recovery, one of those things that I always wanted to know that I didn't anticipate, how is my family going to react when I decided to get sober? More particularly, the time demands on getting sober. And that took a long time.
It's different for everybody, right? I mean, it depends on what you're coming in from. You know, I have a perspective that's actually two perspectives because I came in once and I came in with two different relationships. So, and they were both very, very different.
So that's very interesting because I think your kids were much younger the first time, much older the second time with a different wife.
Right. And the way I came in was different. When I came in the first time, I was really, really beaten down, had gone through a fairly long stretch of really heavy alcoholic type drinking and was really just beaten down. And it was pretty obvious to everyone around me and in me even by that point that I had a problem. The second time when I relapsed, it didn't last as long. I wasn't abusing alcohol in the volume that I was the first time. It was still very problematic. There was no problem, no question about that. And I got back a lot sooner before damage was done, right? But very different dynamics there, very different dynamics.
Yeah.
Because, number one, my first wife knew I was drinking, maybe not so much, and she had seen the progress. And my second wife, my current wife, sort of married me in what she thought was some type of sobriety, and didn't know I relapsed and all that stuff. So very different things, and you're right. It's still an issue today for me. Last week, every night I was out. Every night, Monday through Friday, I was out for an AA function. And my wife, she notices that, She notices that, and she questions that. And I tell her, and she knows it's not typically like that. But last week it was. It was just one of those weeks.
I remember when I first got sober, and I hadn't anticipated this. So when I first got sober, I was like going to one meeting a week, then two, then three. I didn't do the 90 and 90. I kind of slowly ramped up, probably over about a month or 2 month period of time. But when I hit my stride, it was 5 or 6 meetings a week, and I had a newborn, and a 2-year-old, and an 8-year-old.
Right. Yeah.
I think those were the ages.
I had first time in, I had a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. So yeah, very, very different times than when I came in the last time. So when I came in the next time, 2010, my kids were 20 and 17, right? Very different stuff. And plus they weren't living with me, right? They were both older, and so they weren't around for the whole thing. So very different, very different. But to get back to your point, the time requirements, and again, this is all different for everybody, how much time you need, how many meetings you're going to go to. Both times, I'll tell you this much, both times when I came in early on, it was easily 4 or 5 meetings a week for me, easily. Because I needed to do that. I needed to do that big time. Part of the time, when I came in the second time, I needed to do it because I didn't want to be home. My wife didn't want me home. We weren't getting along really well. She was pretty disgusted with me relapsing and all the problems. And it was just better for our relationship. It really was better that we'd be separated at work all day. She'd be at her job, I'd be at my job. And when I came home, I'd go out to a meeting. So we spent very little time together as I went through and did what I needed to do, which was partly, we hear about it, doing a living amends, right? So I needed to earn some trust back and let her know. And she didn't care at that point. She didn't care if I was out every night. Now she does, right? Which is a nice problem to have. She'd rather have me around, but she understands that I have some obligations, and she certainly knows this is one of them. She knows. But this is an easy one, right? I mean, I just go down to the office, we do this, and then it's still early enough that I could spend time with her tonight. We're going to watch a show or something, so it's not that big of a deal.
I remember my wife being not happy with me, and there were periods of time where she was tolerant, pissed off, tolerant, pissed off, and I was terrified of those periods of time. Also going on at the same time, she had not really gotten over her mother's passing. Right. Her mother had passed a couple of years prior, and she just never dealt with it.
Right.
So she had her own level of anxiety and issues. And I will tell you, in conjunction with my wife going into therapy for a little bit, finding some medication, that fixed things pretty quickly. It was around that time, but I think it was coincidental. But before that, I mean, there were times that I went out to a meeting and I was terrified of how she would react by the time I got home. Terrified.
Oh, there's no question about it. And again, I guess I'll just separate it out because I really think this impacts me more now than it did the first time. When I came in the first time, I think my wife was so relieved that I was getting helped, right? So she didn't care, even though she had a young kid. The truth is I helped out with my kids, but I think the first time in, my wife was used to, we read about it. My wife was used to doing most of the stuff, right? Because I was not capable of doing them. I would help out. I would do the best I could, and then I would go disappear and do my drinking. And once the kids were down, my kids were pretty much scheduled kids. So when I came in, all my early years of drinking, the first time in the early 90s, my kids would be in bed at 7 o'clock, whatever. I would have a reason to go to the basement. I was doing some computer work and stuff like that. And I'd have a reason to go down there and drink. And that's what I did. I talk about it all the time. My idea of drinking was go to the basement and drink alone. And I would have a reason to do that. So my wife was, my first wife was used to doing a lot of that work. And she was just grateful to have me back. Now, one of the problems was when I first came in is I didn't do meetings for that long, right? That was one of the things. So first 3 years, I probably did a bunch of meetings. And actually, by the time I got to year 3, I was already slacking off on my meetings. So it was never a big problem. This time, right, now I'm 12 years into this round, and I do meetings, right, which has been helpful. And even my wife will say it's helpful. This time around, did 5 AA functions last week, right? 12 years in, almost 13 years in. That's the difference. And for me, that's the difference of the quality of my program. But it takes an impact, It has an impact, especially if you're both working, right? You have young kids at home, right? Your life is busy. I don't. My kids are older right now. I'm older. So my wife's retired. I'm sort of semi-retired. So we have a lot of time during the day and this is the same thing we discuss all the time, is if my wife gets uncomfortable with me being out, I always tell her, listen, I'm home all day. If there's something you want to do, we can do it during the day, where we couldn't do that earlier when we were both working and, we were both out of the house for 8 or 9 hours during the day.
I work from home now, and so does for the most part, my wife works from home. She goes in for big meetings and stuff, and she does some travel. But for the most part, we're both at home. When I was working in an office, there were times I would drive directly to a meeting from the office, so I'm not getting home until 8:30, 9, 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah, that takes a toll. Get it. We always talk about it, and you need to do it. If you need to do it, if you need to do it, that's for sure. But you need to put in some time, and that does take a toll on whoever's home, on not only your wife, but your kids too. Your kids want you home typically, and just having mom around, it's a stressful situation. I've done that many times. I was in I've talked about it. I was in a pretty high pressure sales job that required me to work long hours. I always found it easier to do it in an office. This is before I had the room to have a home office. If I worked from home in the past during that time, I was literally at the kitchen table working from home.
Right.
Whereas once my kids were out of the house and they weren't coming around and we had an extra bedroom, I was able to finally, when I started to work from home regularly, set up an office in one of the extra bedrooms. So, a lot of that time I was the same thing. Like I often went from work. I'd leave for work at 7 o'clock in the morning. My wife would be gone and not get home. She was an early bed person. My wife would be in bed, but we wouldn't see each other. She'd be in bed by the time I got home.
Yeah, my wife would be in bed times.
Right. If I got home at 8:30, 9 o'clock, absolutely, my wife was in bed.
I'm trying to remember how long that period of time was where there was a lot of home resistance to going to meetings. And I think it was 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah, easily.
But it felt like the longest damn 2 years ever. And it just felt like she's never going to go for this. I'm going to have to deal with this, and I'm going to have to ride the wave and pick and choose meetings and ask for forgiveness, not permission, for the rest of my life. And that was very stressful.
It is very stressful. I've talked about on this podcast, if you listen to this podcast regularly, you will have heard me say several times that when I came into when I came back to the program this time, I wasn't sure that my marriage was going to make it. Right? I wasn't sure. And not all marriages make it, even in recovery, right? This is the point. Even in recovery, not all marriages make it.
Right.
You know, one of the things we read The Family Afterward in the big book last night. It talks, one of the parts I shared on was, it talks about the cessation of drinking, stopping drinking is but the beginning of the recovery period, right? It's the beginning. And that, I think, is a hard thing for a lot of people, is they think, oh, I'm sober now, I'm not drinking now. I know it was for me. Again, if you listen to my story, I really thought when I came in the first time, okay, I stopped drinking, everything's better, which is why I stopped going to meetings. Because I actually thought, like, oh, that's what I came here for. I came here to stop drinking. I stopped drinking. Let me go on with my life. It was a big mistake for me. But it is just the beginning. And not every marriage will survive it. That's the truth, because there's a lot of requirements for many of us, not for all of us, but for many of us, to be able to find some. We talk about balance. Balance is a weird word. Balance, you can't always have balance. Sometimes you need program, and sometimes that program has to be, in the forefront, and sometimes you need family time, so you got to work on that.
In the beginning, there really is not much balance.
No.
And this was part of my problem that got me in this situation. Anything I get involved in, I have to be the best at it. So if I was going to jump into AA, I was going to be the best new guy in AA ever. I was going to race through the steps as fast as possible and nail them like it was a test, that I was going to have this completely figured out, and I was going to be performing at an exceptional level as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. It doesn't quite work that way, but it forced me to volunteer for service positions and doing extra things and going out to speaker meetings to see people and support them, of doing all this extra stuff that if the phone rang, hey, you want to join us with something? Yeah, I said yes every single time. And there were times I just dropped everything and left. And it can sound like I'm pissing and moaning about, oh, boo-hoo me, I had a hard time here. No, it's not boo-hoo me. I got myself in the position of becoming an alcoholic and needing to treat it. And therefore, there are some things that happen that you have to finesse. And it's very understandable that a spouse or people in the house look to you and say, why are you leaving? You shouldn't drink. You shouldn't overdrink. And it should just be that. You shouldn't act like a jerk, and you shouldn't drink. Period. It should not require an investment of time for you to do that, which I agree with that, but that's not my reality.
I never felt it. Listen, you came in, one of the things I've always admired about you is you did come in, and you came in very strong into this program, and you did a lot of stuff. Listen, I just signed up to be a GSR. It's the first district level thing I've ever done. It just hasn't been something. Now, you were treasurer for district, right? For how long?
I was so I had a 2-year commitment. I think it was 4 years.
Okay. Right.
But I was an alternate GSR, I think, within my first year. I wasn't even a year sober. I was an alternate GSR that first year. Then I was a GSR.
Yeah.
And as soon as that ended, I became the treasurer.
So you immediately got into some of that service stuff. I've always done meeting level, group level service stuff, done a lot of that, always chaired, always made coffee, all that kind of stuff. And I enjoy doing that. I enjoy being an impact on the groups that I belong to. One of the reasons why I've stayed away from some of that more district stuff is because I am drawn to that kind of stuff. And I was always afraid that if I got involved with there, I'd get involved with more, and they would take me out of the house more, right? Because not only can I be a GSR, which is what I am now, then I could get on one of the committees, right? Which now is like, okay, it's a meeting a month. Then it's a meeting a month plus your committee meeting a month plus another meeting, so next thing you know, now you're going to 4 meetings a month on top of your AA meetings. So I've been reluctant to do that, but I did feel like I needed to do something. I needed to give back to this program that has given me so much. So this year I became a GSR. Maybe I'll do something in the future, but right now that's good enough for me.
If there's one thing that's helped keep me sober and enhance my sobriety, it's the service work I've done. What's great, even at a local level, whether it's there's a lot of times I on the ride to the Monday night meeting, I piss and moan in my head that I got to run the Zoom meeting because last month I just chaired.
Right.
I think about it this way. I'm there to help other people. I go back and forth. I'm like, oh, why do I have to do this? I got to stand. I would, you know what? Once in a while, I would just like to go to the meeting and just sit and veg.
Yeah. Tell me
Why
about
can't
it.
I just be a participant?
Tell me about it.
But I don't have that skill set. I have the skill set to do some of these things. I should be utilized that way to give back.
I was just talking about it. French Mike came over last night because it was a small meeting, and he says, "Oh, we should talk about Dave B. You know, maybe doing his Joe and Charlie on a different night rather than Monday night because he seems to take a few guys from our meeting." And I said, "Well, Dave B is moving pretty soon, so we won't have that problem." But I said, "Listen, I've been doing the Zoom on that meeting for since the pandemic, 3 years, and God knows I'd love to go there some night and just sit back and do nothing." But I do realize we've talked about this before. Why, we did it just last week before. Mm-hmm. Why do we have meetings? And I'll tell you a little story that really helped me cement how this works for me. There's a friend of mine, and a person in AA who just recently passed away, Dick F's, Spaghetti Dick, he went by.
So just pause you for a second. One of the greatest things that you're missing out if you're not part of a 12-step group are these ridiculous names people have in recovery.
No, that's why.
Like Spaghetti Dick.
Spaghetti Dick. And it's because he loved to cook spaghetti. So nothing else. If your mind was going elsewhere, forget about it. He loved to cook spaghetti. So anyway, Dick he was an older gentleman in his mid-70s. He just recently passed. He passed Sunday night. And he lived in Colchester. And he always had to since I knew him pretty much, he needed a ride to meetings. And there was always somebody else picking him up. And I remember one day saying to him, and I like to be helpful, but sometimes it's ego, saying, "Hey, Dick, if you ever need a ride, I'll be happy to help you out." So one day he reached out to me for a ride, and I picked him up. And long story short, I became his ride. Now, Colchester is about a 25-minute ride for me in the opposite direction of any meeting we'd be going to. So if I picked him up for our Friday night meeting, which is the meeting I typically took him to, I would have to leave my house just around 6 o'clock so I could pick him up, get to the meeting sometime just after 7 for a 7:30 meeting. And so it'd be 6 o'clock to about 10 o'clock for me. And I did it for a while, and when I realized I was becoming his only ride to the meeting, I had a huge resentment. I was so pissed off. And it took me a couple weeks, but I finally realized that I could use it as like a service, like be grateful that I could do this for him. And Dick and I developed an incredible relationship, right?
Yeah.
Number one is we had this time. We had a 40-minute drive to and a 40-minute drive home every week almost. And we developed this great friendship. And it became a pleasure. It turned into something that was a resentment and turned into a pleasure. And I used to love to go pick up Dick and take him. Then he moved to another town, and it was still about 25 minutes away from me, but it was actually closer to our meeting, so it was a little bit easier to do. His health went downhill, and I was lucky enough. I had some chances to go see him in the last month, spend some time with him. Matter of fact, I went to see him maybe about 10 days or 2 weeks ago, and I knew he wasn't doing well, and I walked in there, and I thought he might not be communicative, and I was talking with his son, who's also a friend. Dick used to always say, "Hey, I'm checking in to see what condition my condition is in," which is a take on a Rolling Stones, right? And so I walked up to him, and he was laying in bed, and I just whispered in his ear, I'm like, "Hey, Dick, I'm here to check in and see what condition my condition was in." And I got a big smile out of him and a laugh, and I'm like, "Oh, he's doing better." So it was just really, really nice. Sad passing. But my point with that whole thing is that I could take something that seems to be a burden and turn it into a positive thing.
Now that he's gone, I would look at it as you had this alone time with this person, that you had the sole focus of another human being once a week who depended on you for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And that's one of those moments that could seem pissy in the moment, and you look back and say, that was a gift, that I had the opportunity to connect with another human being at another level because we had no choice otherwise.
Again, and I watched this go through. It went from the point where Dick couldn't drive. He had some eyesight problems and physical problems, back problems. But I went from Dick not just being able to drive because of some eye problems to needing a wheelchair to get to his meetings, right? So, and there was another guy who would get him on occasion, I think, as much as he could and get him out to a different meeting. But it was just, listen, it turned out, again, once I got rid of that resentment and I sort of figured out what life is all about, I just realized, it was this beautiful connection I made with another human being. I'll always remember Dick. I mean, it's something I always remember, right? We always talk about it. On our deathbed, we're never going to say, I should have spent more time in the office, right?
Right.
I'm going to say, I'm going to think about the friends I've had, and Dick is going to be one of those guys. Dick was a Vietnam vet, all these things, right? Great conversations with him. Loved music. We talk about music, talk about sports. Political opposites, right? We recognized early on that politics was probably something we weren't going to talk about, but we were able to have our friendship and everything else.
It can be very easy for the family to look at those moments of, you care more about somebody like Dick than you do about me, that you choose to leave the home and go do that.
Yeah.
You're at a drop of a hat, you're going off to a meeting. It's Saturday night. I thought we were going to watch a movie together.
That's happened many times with me. My wife's a great calendar worker. She puts every appointment she has, she puts on a calendar. I'm a horrible calendar user. And I try, I do the best I can. I won't even say I do the best I can. I do what I can. There has been plenty of times that something will happen and I'll say, I got to go out to this meeting tonight, and she'll say, it's not on the calendar. And I'm like, nope, you're right. And it'll piss her off because she's thinking I'm going to be home. So there's always those type of things. I realized long ago that the most important thing for me is to keep my program going, to stay sober. You said it perfectly. If I need to, I'm going to ask for forgiveness more than permission. Usually. So there's times where I'll ask for permission, but most of the times I'm going to be asking for forgiveness.
I will tell you what helped get us over the hump is we had a heart-to-heart, and she had a therapist who told her that if I was still going to as many meetings as I did at the time, that I must be a dry drunk and I shouldn't need to go. And she cited a couple other people we know who were spotty in their meeting attendance. And I knew the level of sobriety that they were at. And I'm like, please do not use those people as an example.
Right.
Because if I'm at the level of sobriety that I see, that's not a good thing. She wanted me to go see a therapist, but it had to be somebody who specialized in the 12 steps. So I agreed to do that. And some of those things where it was a little give and take helped. And I think also seeing that there are results. We're really not at that place anymore. That there are times now that she will tell me, I think you should go to a meeting. Or I'll say sometimes, I really don't want to go. Yeah, you should go.
Yeah.
This is your night. I already planned for you to be gone.
Right.
You should go.
Absolutely. And my wife has said the same thing. If something came up, I'm like, I'm not going to go, or I'm not going to do this, or I don't have to pick up this person. A lot of times she'll say, well, I've already had plans anyway, right? I made plans. A lot of times my wife will make plans with friends if she knows we're going. I've been going out to this Friday night meeting since I got sober. So Friday night has always been the night that my wife makes plans with her friends. They would always get together. They'd go out to dinner. They'd love to play Scrabble. They do that kind of stuff. So, and if I didn't have a meeting for whatever reason on Friday night, church wasn't available, she still went out. She's like, no, it's my night out. And I would typically just find another place to go. But one thing we glossed over, and I just want to touch base on it, is you said, we were talking a little bit about balance, right? You said it that early in a program, early in somebody's recovery, there's not a lot of balance, right?
Nope.
And there shouldn't be. And I've told that to many of the guys who I've worked with, whether I've been their sponsor or just talked to them, is like, now is not the time to have balance. Now is the time to really cement a program for yourself and to try to figure out what meetings work for you, what people work for you. Like, really take that time early when you come in to find out, what do you need? I always tell people you need to find your meetings and you need to find your people. I think you did that early on, and I know I did that early on. And once I found those meetings, and typically for me, they're the same. Like, I go to meetings because there's people there that I like. We talk about Joe and Charlie, We're doing a Joe and Charlie. I'm doing that Joe and Charlie this year because of the people more than the Joe and Charlie, right?
Right.
It's like the people there what is what attracts me to that. I tell that all the time. Balance is not something you need early. Later on, you could talk about it, but early on, not at all.
This is the principle. If you put the work in up front, you don't have to do as much work on the back end. It's that case in anything. You start a new job, put everything in to learn as much as you can up front, get to know as many people in the organization so it's easier on the back end. It's like that with gardening, weightlifting, whatever. If you put that effort into your recovery program in the beginning, that you dive in when it's uncomfortable, it's a lot easier down the road. If you just dip your toe in, those are the people I have seen that relapse or don't make it or don't come back again.
Well, they struggle with the quality of their sobriety, right? We talked about it. It's not always relapsing. It's always, but you struggle with the quality. We know lots of people out there who struggle with the quality of their program. Listen, everybody should know. I don't want to take other people's inventory, and I don't want to tell them. Even sponsees. I'm not the kind. Mm-hmm. I am not the kind of sponsor that I tell them like you have to do this and you have to do that and you have to go to this many meetings. I do not tell them that. First of all, and partly that's because my sponsor never told me that. That's the way I came in. Everybody's got to figure it out for themselves. And if you want quality sobriety, then you need to do whatever it is for you that's going to get you quality sobriety. And if that's 5 meetings a week, then that's what it is, you know. And if that's a 90 and 90, then that's what it is. I never did a 90 and 90 myself. Either time I came in, I went to plenty of meetings. And truthfully, I may have done a 90 and 90, but I never kept track of it. It wasn't a goal of mine to do 90 and 90. So I did a meeting when I needed to do a meeting. I still do meetings when I need. Like when I'm feeling uncomfortable, when I'm messed up, when I'm pissed off, when I'm angry at the world, I know I need a meeting. So I go out to a meeting. And if I say that to my wife, hey, listen, I'm feeling really uncomfortable, I'm pretty pissed off or whatever, she's going to say, fine, go get your medicine, man. I don't want you around like that.
We had somebody last night who brought a 6-month-old.
Yeah.
I thought that was great.
Yeah.
I used that as an excuse, brought the 6-month-old, and we were, I think, as responsible as possible to say, if you got to do this again, bring the baby.
Oh, absolutely.
If you need somebody to hold the baby, let us know.
He and I text almost every morning, and he sent me a text today. Hey, have a great day, enjoy your day. And I text him back. Hey, thanks for bringing your daughter in. I love seeing her, even though when I picked her up and I held her, she started screaming.
It's only time.
Yeah.
She's quiet until you got a hold of her.
Right. Yeah, she was. But no, I'm happy. And I heard him say, I heard him talking to his sponsor there, and he's talking about how, listen, he's got a 6-month-old. He's been going to school. I know this fellow, right? He's been going to school.
Yeah.
He's been working. It's really, really hard. And I heard him talking to his sponsor about trying to figure out, like, hey, how do I do this? How do I keep my program going? How do I make this happen? And you know how you make it happen? You bring your daughter to the meeting. If this meeting happens to be one, he can do that. Bring her to the meeting. He had to step out, but at least he's there. He shared, right? He shared at the meeting. Even if he doesn't get the whole thing out of it, he's there. He's trying. He'll get something out of it.
The key, I think, as well, is plan things out. If you're in a situation where it's busy and all hell is breaking loose, and this is hard sometimes for me to do, although I'm easier to do this at work, just sit down one night and look at your calendar and plan. If you got to plan out 2 weeks in advance, here are the nights I can go, here are the nights I can't, here's why. And do it that way, because if you sit there and look at your calendar, you might find that you have a little bit more time than you thought you did.
I always think there's time for meetings. I really do. I definitely think there's times to squeeze them in. And it's typically what I have found for me. I think I hear this from most people. It's an excuse many times. Oh, I don't have time. And listen, the old timers will tell you that that's just an excuse of not wanting to go to a meeting, That's just bullshit. Get your ass to the meeting. That we all have time, and that's not having your priorities, right? And that's the other thing, not having your priorities. And if people start telling you, I don't have time to go to a meeting, then that just means that their program is less important than other things in their lives. one of the things that I do is I have a bunch of meetings that I like to go to that I don't go to regularly, right? Thursday night, the Thursday night men's group. I love to go. I know more than half the guys that go to that meeting. So I know that when I have an opportunity, sometimes my wife will come home and say, hey, I'm going out with my friend on Thursday night instead of Friday this week. I use that as an opportunity many times, like, oh, I could go see the Thursday night guys, right? And you know what's beautiful about that meeting is that is a meeting that it's not one of my groups, is I could go there and do nothing. You know, It's the sweet part of me going to that meeting. I don't have to chair. I don't have to do anything. If there's a business meeting, I don't have to stay for it. I just go there. I say hi to my friends. Maybe I share if I like the subject. Maybe I don't. At the end of the meeting, I go home. And it's nice. It's nice because I don't have any other obligations at that meeting.
Yeah, that is nice sometimes to just go in and not have to do all those things, but it's helpful.
Right.
I'll say one last thing about this, that if you're looking for that currency to get your family off your back, here's one of these things. If you put in some work and you start showing results, you might get some more support.
Yeah.
The better you get, the faster you get, and you can tie it back to what you're doing, you probably will get a little bit more leeway if you can show the investment.
Yeah, I agree.
So if you're in this position, you're not alone. If you're brand new and you're going to meetings or however you're addressing your recovery and you're getting crap from the family, this happens to all of us. And it might go away in 3 months. It may go away in 3 years. It may take time. But you got to find a way to do it. You got to communicate. You got to plan and get the results. The better you get, the faster you get. Human nature shows that other people will then be supportive. Now you can get to the point where the two of us are, and John as well, where we have spouses that'll say, you should go. The way we're behaving tells them, you need to get out of this house and you need to go to a meeting. I will tell you, that pisses me off more than anything else.
Yeah.
That is not something I want to hear.
It used to piss me off, and nowadays it's a red flag to me. Like if my wife's picking up on it before I am, then it's like, that means I'm ignoring it typically, because it means I'm not behaving the way I should behave. So, but it is good. It is good to know that you have somebody who will tell you, hey, listen, looks like you're slipping. My wife will say, looks like you're slipping a little bit. She'll actually use those words. You know, you're a little bit more angry. I think you may need to look at some things. Today I can say to her, I just shared this the other night. I just shared this Friday. She said that to me, and I said, you know something, you're right. I would have fought. There would have been fighting words for me in the past. Nowadays I can say you're right. I need to pay attention to that. So
all progress.
Well,
you all have been giving us a lot more feedback, starting to come in more. We get emails from you. We get messages on Instagram. We read every single one of them, and if we can respond in a way that's going to help you, we're going to do that. We love this feedback. I'd love to hear your stories on how you handled first getting sober, how it affected your recovery. So we'd love to hear your feedback on how this went for you early on, what your advice is. You can reach out to us at soberfriendspod.com, Instagram at soberfriendspod. It's been a while since you gave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We love that feedback. Give us a 5-star review if you think we deserve it. And if you like the podcast, share it with somebody. It would help as well. It helps us spread the message that you're not alone and that recovery is possible. Steve, thanks for a great show tonight.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for having this, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. And we'll see everybody next week. Bye, everybody. You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod.